Testing, testing. Hey, you want to go in the back? Oh, yeah, you're muted. Just 1 sec. They're like
How
on the
about
back, so
now?
we need to
Okay.
go pick it up. So they opened it up. They're like, okay, we're not coming up. Testing, testing. Audio is going. Testing, testing.
Hello, everybody. We will be starting at 5 p.m. sharp, so that's in about 4 minutes. So, yes.
One, two, three, 1, 2, 3, testing. 1, 2, 4. Oh my God, it's leaking. 3 dropped out.
It's a Bollywood movie reference, yeah. It's completely new for this audience, so why not? I can't do this in English.
Could I have the 3 candidates come down to see us at the desk right here? So, Come on to the desk. All right. Nick, could you come down here?
Perfect. Okay. We have a bunch of popcorn at the front. If anybody wants popcorn, please feel free to help yourself. And if you are here as a student, please scan the QR code up at the front just for check-in so we can know how many people attended. But have fun, everyone.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be starting the WUSA officers debate for this year. We have three presidential, I'm Abhiraj. I'm going to be one of your moderators this evening.
And my name is Charlie, and I will be the second moderator.
So this debate will allow you to learn more about your WUSA presidential candidates and make an informed choice. We have three presidential candidates this time and no vice presidential candidates. We'll be calling the candidates up on stage now. First, can we have Mr. Rahman? Yes, please do. Next up, we have Mr. Razmaju of the Waterloo United Party. And last but not the least, we have Mr. Feifel of the Renew Party.
You might be wondering how this debate is going to be formatted. Well, throughout the next 2 hours, there are a variety of questions that we'll be asking each of the candidates, both general questions and one specific to their campaign. While asking each question, we will also announce a time limit for answers that will apply to each candidate equally. Once the time limit is reached, we will announce this and have your statement be concluded. In the case that another candidate references your campaign or you individually, we'll allow you to obviously respond to that statement. We also might ask you to follow up on a certain statement if we believe it is necessary, and in each of those cases, we will give you 1 minute to respond. Other than that, I hope everyone in the audience is informed by this debate.
And just some housekeeping rules. Candidates will be expected not to interrupt each other and to use professional language. Any usage of unprofessional language will result in candidates being cut off, will result in one warning and then candidates being cut off prior to their time limit being completed. And the audience is also applaud, maybe cheer at times, but within reason. We have 2 hours, and this is your opportunity to learn about the candidates. So the audience is also expected to remain professional and respectful throughout the debate.
And candidates, you have 1 microphone, so we ask when you're done speaking to pass it to the next speaker.
So to begin with, we'll be starting with Mr. Rahman. Could you introduce yourself and give us an opening statement, including why you're running for president and what the gist of your campaign is, and a general introduction of yourself, name, program year. You'll have 1.5 minutes for this. Go.
Turn on the microphone. It's just the button in the middle there.
I'll reset the timer.
Hold it down.
Okay, I think it's okay. My name is Raphael, Raphael Rahman. I'm in my 4th year. I'm in honors arts, majoring in legal studies. Why am I running for president of WUSA? I guess it ultimately boils down to there are some changes that I want to see, and I think that I'm the best person to bring those into action. First and foremost, one of my main platform points is going to be focused around I guess addressing the lack of protections for co-op students. I guess I feel very strongly that a lot of co-op students are often being exploited and being taken advantage of. The fact that they are their protections are fairly limited, and this goes for workers' rights, and there are very few avenues to actually pursue it, and even in pursuing it, they can often jeopardize their future co-op career. I'd love to go on more, but let me tell you more about my other campaign points, which I guess next would be housing. Housing is a very persistent issue all over the country, all over the province. Everyone knows this. A lot of people might say that housing goes beyond the scope of just the university, and that is absolutely true. But I definitely think that there needs to be a lot more action towards addressing
That's
it.
your time, Mr. Rahman. Thank you. That's your time, Mr. Rahman. Thank you. Next up, we'll be moving to Mr. Razmanju. Thank you. 1.5 minutes. Why you want to run for president, and a short opening statement.
Awesome. So nice to meet everybody online and here in person. So yes, my name is Arya. I'm the presidential candidate for Waterloo United. So we are a team of students representing more faculties than any other running in this election to bring some fundamental change, guys. We have an incredibly experienced team of students who are passionate and are ready to deliver. What sets us apart is that we will have the numbers necessary to create change. WUSA needs some fundamental reforms and needs some initiatives. It needs a strong board that is willing to fight and deliver. And that's what we can bring to the table with our knowledge of the institution, with our knowledge of Waterloo as a whole, as well as the diversity of opinion and group that our team offers. We are confident that we can create the changes that everyone wants to see. Things start from diversity that the university needs to continue to push, to efficiency, to new communication channels we're going to introduce, to even support for our clubs and groups that are existing on campus. So we have a lot of interesting plans that I'm going to talk to you guys about more in detail as we go into the debate, and how we're going to support them. But we're going to release funding, we're going to create a much more social atmosphere in this university, and we are going to address the key communication issues. That much I can assure you. Yeah?
Thank you. Let's move on to Mr. Feifel.
Well, good morning, everyone, or I guess evening. It's quite the day we've had. But yeah, my name's Nicholas Feifel. I'm a 5th year nanotechnology engineering student. I've been here for quite a while. I'm familiar with a lot of the structures we've seen in the past, and myself and my team are very passionate about making sure that we're taking actions that we've already seen happen, the advocacy we've already done, and moving that to more professional context. So I think we're very proud of the work we've already done with things like co-op, with environmental advocacy, improving some housing, and especially advocating for housing in specific, as well as some more recent projects that we're starting to take on, like improving our transit network, making sure that everyone is working together collaboratively to see those improvements in transportation throughout the city, as well as seeing some more fundamental governance changes within WUSA that I think aren't well tackled by internal mechanisms. Using a lot of these existing structures, these communities that we've already seen growing on campus and recovering from the pandemic, to actually tackle these issues and make sure that they're done by including as many students as possible with their expertise well considered.
Thank you.
Thank you, and moving on to our second question, starting with Mr. Razmanju and moving to your right. Can you explain in your own words, please, how WUSA currently functions and how the organization advocates for students? You have 1 minute.
Awesome, awesome. So WUSA actually functions as a nonprofit organization. So the Student Association has a main board, okay? The board is filled with directors, and then there's 2 officer positions. That's the president and the VP. So the president and the VP usually work with the full-time staff. They're the ones who do most of the advocacy work you guys see. While our board, which is filled with our part-time student representatives, who sit on a whole bunch of committees that, advocate for your interests as well. When it comes to advocacy, WUSA has a big role in the way they interact with the university, as well as how we do with our federal and provincial partners, right? So the VP of WUSA, for example, although we don't have one candidate this election, the VP of WUSA, when appointed, they're the ones who are going to meet with the politicians, they're the ones who meet with our mayor, members of Congress, and many of other partners to actually push for the policy changes we need. Things like getting better housing rights for our students, working to ensure development is taking place in this region so we have affordable housing for people. Things like ensuring that OSAP funding is adequate so our students are fully supported. The presidential role, on the other hand, deals with internal advocacy. So as the president, you sit on the Senate and the board.
That's your time, Mr. Asmanjou.
Okay,
We'll go
awesome.
to Mr. Feifel, to your right.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you asked how WUSA functions, and I think something that a lot of students feel and that we've seen is that it doesn't really function at this time. We have a board structure. We lack a council structure. These sort of these handcuffs on our operations are a significant negative impact on the ability of students to see advocacy done in the way that they'd like to see done. As my colleagues have mentioned, there are councils, there are boards that the membership of the WUSA director team sits on, but they're not well positioned to actually be able to move that advocacy that is generated at the grassroots level and actually have that affect university policy and policy in the community at large. One of the things that my team is strongly pushing for is improved advocacy, and one of our first actions that we would take is to make sure that the day-to-day operations are not interfering with advocacy. So moving advocacy directly underneath the board so that it's better able to be communicated with and that we are able to more effectively and quickly react to problems on campus.
Thank you, Mr. Feifel, and we'll move on to Mr. Remen.
I guess it's hard to say something different from what they described, but I guess, in terms of how WUSA functions, and advocates for students, that would be like involving reaching out to shareholders and politicians on the municipal, federal, and provincial level to advocate for change in favor of students. That can involve recommending certain policy changes to those specific governments, but also regarding the presidential role, that is again more internal advocacy within the actual WUSA organization itself. Generally speaking, the board, the way that they operate is they discuss and try to balance the interests of the students as well as managing fiduciary interests for the Waterloo Corporation as a whole. And in those balances, I guess those decisions are made.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love moving on after that question because at this point we're all aware that our candidates at least know how the current system functions and we can move on to policies. So with that in mind, let's start with Mr. Feifel. What part of WUSA's current 2020 to 2025 long-range plan do you think you will spend the most time working towards during your term in office if elected?
I think that's an interesting way to start because it's not something that I saw a lot of communication with from WUSA to the students directly. And that's not what I feel, and I don't think that's what Team Renew is confident is actually going to be a strong benefit to the organization. The democratic imperative rests with WUSA, and it needs to be maintained. So we shouldn't be focusing on something that was established, especially in 2020, when there was a lot of conflict going on within WUSA, as an effective model moving forward. There are strategies and techniques that have been employed. I'll point to one of the director candidates, Jeff, in housing and co-op that have gone very well, but many other things have gone very poorly. And I think it's not effective to try and continue forward with such a contentious year, rather to rethink our strategy moving forward to make sure that students are accurately represented and that when we are making these models, we're using adequate feedback, not just pushing things through with blinders on.
Thank you. And next on that, yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? Sorry.
That's one. Let's move on to Mr. Rahman. What part of WUSA's current 2020 to 2025 long-range plan do you think you will spend the most time working towards during your term in office, or as Mr. Feifel rightly pointed out, will you, if any at all?
I guess, working within that 5-year plan, there are a lot of issues regarding, the fact that it was, this is something that I definitely agree with Feifel on, that it was created and demonstrated like during a very contentious time, whether or not it is to be like necessarily adhered to will, I guess, boil down to the very specifics of like each individual point of that plan. But generally speaking, my platform is ultimately going to be more focused on, I guess, student interests regarding accessibility, improving campus accessibility, improving protections for students in housing, but also co-op and just in general, I guess making life for students here a lot easier. But yeah.
Yeah. So this new board is actually going to write the next 5-year plan that's coming. So it's going to be up to for us to renew their plan. Look, this plan is effective and it's a good thing. A board has 360 days in a given time. That's not enough time to pass all the legislation they want. This plan gives us the ability to strategize on a long-term basis. Like previously said, like said by Nick, Jeff, who's a member of our team, actually used the plan to see success in his policies. When I develop this plan, we're going to prioritize a fundamental change. So what that means is we're going to start putting in this plan an independence on our HR department, for example. We want to see independent HR currently, for example, in WUSA. They do the hiring process for us. They set the salaries of our staff, they hire our staff, which leads to situations like shortages when the university refuses to hire on timely manner. So, but they fight us in those areas, right? So it comes about getting institutional independence from this university. Using things like the 5-year plan will give us the ability to mandate future boards to focus on these important plans. So when our term runs out, these advocacy goals are not forgotten. So that's what the 5-year is there for. And in this new board, which will write up the new 5-year plan, I'm confident we're using it, we can get some institutional independence, which is going to be my priority. Yeah.
Just to follow up, for either, two of our candidates mentioned that it was a contentious time in 2020, and so I'm wondering if any of you have anything to say about why exactly 2020 was that way and what is different about now. If anyone would like to cover that.
It's an interesting place to start, but I think one of the things that, if we look back to the 2020 election, when we had that, both we were doing a lot of governance changes into a pandemic, but also the group that was there at the time wasn't the most popular. They were running largely unopposed. They were just institutional groups, and they were trying to move away from a non-working model of the Federation of Students to their current system. But it overall was very focused on making sure that they adhered to a sunk cost fallacy that they were going along with. And that's something that very much frustrates me and makes me feel like we're not really actually doing what students want, and they very much ignored student input for that time. That's something that I find incredibly distasteful, and I think we should avoid going forward. So I'm sure my colleagues would agree, student input is the most important aspect of creating a long-range plan, and that's something that we saw them largely ignoring at the time, instead favoring their own expertise.
Yeah, I guess there were a lot of obstacles. I definitely don't blame the people that that worked on that plan. And I mean, yeah, it's the fact that they were running unopposed. Generally speaking, WUSA did not have much input from students. There was very little actual student engagement. There were also it's the governance changes that were happening at the time. There was a lot of I guess moving components that made it very difficult to actually focus on what would be effective and what actually should be prioritized.
Thank you. Okay, and moving on to question 4, and we'll start with Mr. Emin. What specific goals do you have for your time in office? In your answer, please address any initiatives WUSA has already undertaken, as well as any new initiatives you would like to undertake if elected. You have 3 minutes.
Right. Some initiatives that WUSA has already taken in the past that I guess I really want to double down on is improving campus accessibility. There have been accessibility initiatives. I know that there was the one that ends, I guess, 2024, and I want to basically be that sort of. I want to drive that home. I want to really not just make those changes on the physical barrier level, improving campus accessibility regarding ramps and doors. It goes a lot deeper than that. I think that there needs to be a large shift in campus culture and how we view disability, and how we understand that in ourselves and also in our fellow students. And when we pursue those accessibility measures, I think that there should just generally be a large-scale consideration regarding any new projects. I also want to push for some sort of initiative to really, as best as possible, hear the voices of students with disabilities. There are very few avenues for students that are struggling with accessibility concerns on campus to really connect and reach out to one another and really see. It's very isolating, and I think that's partly why there's that disconnect in that sort of attitude that we should have towards accessibility. I guess next, I also want to see a lot more changes in housing. That's a serious thing. I definitely I know that Jeff Zhu has made commendable, very, very commendable changes and efforts in pursuing affordable housing in Waterloo, but a lot of these problems exist on the federal level and also the provincial level with lack of funding. As much as the municipal government tries to sort of build affordable housing, there is just that problem that there are freezes and cuts that haven't been unfrozen, and we need to get that. We need to get that through. I want I guess an institutional-wide an institutional-wide effort towards something like some actionable change in the housing front, and issues like housing and workers' rights also disproportionately affects most vulnerable groups, including students that struggle with disabilities. I guess it's the fact that it's difficult for students that are students with disabilities when in their co-op terms to sort of have that sort of protection for accommodation. That's something that I definitely want to prioritize. Yeah, I guess.
That is your time.
Right.
On to Mr. Razmanju.
Can you repeat the question really quickly?
Yes.
Awesome.
So we're looking here for you to list any specific goals that you have in your time in office, either ones that are new to WUSA or ones that are currently ongoing.
Yeah, okay,
What would you like to accomplish, essentially?
Excellent. So we have a lot that we want to get through. So speaking, one of the ones I'll talk about, for example, getting an independent, fully operational HR department so we can control our own hirings, making sure our staff are well supported, investigating the institution and seeing why is it that we have delayed reimbursements, lack of communications. These are areas of operational failures that is happening. So we need to actually go deep dive and see why is it that WUSA is failing and how can we best address it using the information from our investigations. We can look into this. This is also why I want to increase funding, like members of my team have been doing who are on the board currently. With us and the new faces joining them, we're going to launch something called the Presidential Fund. Currently, the way it works with WUSA for clubs and societies to get money is that they have to go through this very bureaucratic, long-term process, which takes months on months and months. I have first-hand experience with this. The Presidential Fund will streamline it, getting rid of red tape and bringing their budget requests directly to the Office of the President, where it can be immediately approved and funding can be quickly released. It's a cycle of what we need to work for. NHR allows us to hire more staff can get reimbursements done quicker, the students can actually have the fundings necessary. It's also about building a better social atmosphere in this university by getting things like the bomb shelter pop back up and running. We have the funds for this. It's just sitting there collecting dust. So it's about investing correctly and investing in areas where necessary so we can actually contribute back to our community. We also want to create better communication lines by actually creating a student senate caucus where the president meets regularly with our student senators, keeps them informed, and has that interpersonal connection. We want to address communication issues when it comes to orientation, where students who are coming to this university in the first year can actually get to know what WUSA does by us getting more involved in the rotation, how our system works, how to get involved. These are realistic plans that are effective and achievable. This is what we're going to push for. This is what we're going to get moving. And with our majority on the board and our experience, we will deliver on all of these.
Thank you very much. And on to Mr. Feifel.
Thank you very much. Yeah, well, what a very broad question you've asked today. Yeah, specific goals for myself and my team are wide-ranging, and a lot of what we're trying to do is set us up for success in the future. There are a couple things we've already accomplished, and you mentioned specifically about something that WUSA advocated for that we also were participating in, and I'll point to myself and my team member Rita, who are working with WUSA on the renege policy. And we decided to not stay as official with the policy that was implemented because we felt like it didn't actually accurately reflect the realities on the ground and didn't properly address some of the issues that were coming up, especially around study and work permits for international students. So we decided to go our own way because we felt like the WUSA advocacy wasn't actually able to fully articulate what students feel. There's a bit of a fear in the background that students would somehow be distrusting of WUSA actually taking action on these things. But that's only one of the many things we're focused on. One of the other things, mentioning, again, and supporting Raphael's point about accessibility on campus that we've already seen some change for is the campus salting shift. So moving away from salt on campus, which can be a dangerous pollutant. It's caused actual health issues outside of town. Campus produces enough salt that it's giving hypertension issues to surrounding areas. It's quite bad. But more than that, what it also does is it encourages the university to ignore repairing things like elevators and preferring that students that need that accessibility issue to go outside. But what all that are able to go outside, now what we're doing is we're preventing things like seeing eye dogs and other assistance animals from being able to use campus because the salt is both toxic to them and also it's injuring the animal itself. These are quite nasty, but obviously important tasks to get moving forward with. And we'd like to continue that problem in the future. Campus isn't that huge, but at least environmentally, we can do a substantial improvement into our local ecosystem and make sure that campus is a healthier place. Some of the other things we care about strongly are housing. We've all had housing challenges. It's almost a larger expense for most students than tuition. Tuition is a great way of abstracting the expenses that were placed on a student, but it's no longer realistic, and we need to approach advocacy with that in mind. There are some things we're very proud of recently, helping out with the train issues that we've been having where the GRT was trying to reduce train times at important times of day and restrict the access of students. And we're not very pleased with that, and we're hoping to see further growth using club funding and club expertise to tackle that, because it is one of those cases where we go much further together than we go alone. Additionally to that, I did want to also critique slightly the point of ARIA on the Senate caucus, which is something that I think would be a negative to student advocacy, and especially in an official context, it removes a lot of the abilities that the Senate has. Working through the Senate, it was quite challenging to adhere to WUSA's strict requirements for the way that advocacy was effective. And having WUSA step in when they are not needed and where advocacy is already existing is not an effective use of WUSA resources that could be better spent elsewhere, like in third places.
Thank you, Mr. Feifel. We're going to allow Arya to follow up for 1 minute.
So the Senate currently is disorganized. We had 4 vacancies, which we are running candidates in now. This system does nothing but improve our opportunities. When the student senators are supported by the Office of the Presidency, they have the information and the backing they need to succeed. This is not stopping them from sharing their own opinions or their views, but this is giving them the ability to connect with us and understand what we're working on, how we're achieving it, and how they can contribute to it if they believe in it. Right? A united Senate of students is effective in actually holding the university accountable in areas where they push against us. Right? We have recently seen, for example, implementation of a reversal of public information that the university putting. They use the word safety, but it's nothing to do with safety. It's about cutting accountabilities that professors face. That's why we want to ensure that things like UW Flow can function, right? That's a policy decision that we can negotiate with the administration of this university to get done. You know, more unity and more support from each other's departments to one another is never a negative. It will only help everybody's voice.
That's it, thank you. Now I have a follow-up. So Mr. Feifel and Mr. Rahman both in their previous answers brought up Director Zhu, who's been, and they said he's been doing a great job at the board. Director Zhu is currently running for re-election as part of Mr. Razmaju's team. So given that Director Zhu is someone whose expertise and whose judgment that both of you have pointed towards, and that he given that judgment, he has chosen to run alongside Mr. Razmaju. What are your thoughts on? Would you say that's in effect an endorsement for Mr. Razmaju and his policies? This is for both Mr. Rahman and Ms. Feifel. Either of you can choose to go first.
Essentially, we're asking why not endorse?
Well, I'm very proud of Jeff, so I'll say that.
To Mr. Feifel, Mr. Rahman, either of you have an answer?
I can respond. I think the short answer is everyone likes Jeff. So there's no offense taken. One of our team members, Nosh Madra, is actively working with Jeff when it comes to revitalizing student spaces on campus through the Faculty of Engineering. and we've participated with him in the past in many ways. I recognize that it's his own choice to work with who he's deciding to work with, but I don't think any of us would be displeased to see Jeff elected to the director position at this election.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'm the same way. Looking into what he's been advocating for is everything I'm on board with. Whether or not that means I'm advocating or I'm saying, vote for Arya. It's a little bit. I mean, I understand that we all have the same interests, which is the best for the students. Who specifically is the one actually enacting those interests and pushing for it? I think is less important than what is actually achievable, what is actually actionable. I think Jeff has been able to show, that what he's advocating for works, and I think that whoever wins, seeking his expertise is definitely probably the best option for achieving our shared goals.
Thank you, Mr. Rahman. Moving on to the next question. So all of you have very strong goals this election season. But more than goals, it's important to have experience, which is why we ask, what experience have you had advocating for to university officials for students? And furthermore, what does effective advocacy look like to you? We'll start with Arya. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, look, we have a team of incredibly experienced individuals who have each shown the success they have. I myself come actually from a background of operational management. I have worked for faculty before, and I have actually negotiated with faculty before for students that I have represented in a variety of different roles. I'll tell you this, when we come to negotiating with the university, we have to do it in a good faith manner. Inevitably, the negotiation, the university controls majority votes in most of the committees. They usually control majority votes in the Senate and many other areas. So it's about coming down and telling them the problems that the students face, how we can best move towards a solution that benefits the student body but also protects the university as well, right? The key here is to be able to negotiate. It's not about just going and putting your hand up and saying, shame on you for doing this, but negotiating a deal that is actually effective, realistic, and possible. Look, I sit on the governance committee of WUSA currently. Although I'm not an elected official, they bring me on to advise them and help them out with some policies. The policies we do, for example, currently, as we spoke, our government structural changes have gone through, but this government structural change isn't even complete yet. We're still writing a lot of its bylaws and policies as we speak. And a lot of these are the background work that allows the institution to function as it goes. So I have a wide of experience. Recently I had a team that I led through what we launched, the biggest interdisciplinary conference in Canada. How fun is that and exciting?
Thank you, Mr. Raju.
Okay,
just to clarify, we have 90 seconds for this question, so moving on to Mr. Feifel.
Yeah, thank you very much. One moment. Yeah, you were asking a question specifically about our previous experience in advocacy and also what effective advocacy looks like, correct?
Indeed.
Very nice. Yeah, so I think Team Renew is very proud of the fact that each of us have already seen effective advocacy occurring in the past. Myself, I've been a president of the Nanotechnology Engineering Society. I've served with the Engineering Society in the past, as well as doing a full term as senator and sitting on the Senate Finance Committee, as well as a variety of committees within WUSA, some of which no longer exist anymore, like my personal favorite, 3AC, which was all about academic issues. But we also have a lot of other experience. I'll highlight, for instance, Daoud, who is a former VP academic, under the old model of WUSA, Emma, who's a club president of Cheese Club, who has advised me that some of the changes that we expect with the presidential fund under ARIA will not necessarily actually proportionally distribute funds. And while I don't distrust ARIA, very much we feel that it's a bad choice to set up a system that could be abused in the future. We might as well just fix it now and use a good solution like a proportional distribution rather than worry about adding extra levels of bureaucracy that can be sort of set by the president at the time as opposed to specifically by a proper structure. In addition to that, I would also highlight Rida Saeed, who is still a member of the Senate and has worked with counseling and wellness to ensure that the 6 session limit was removed, which we're very proud of.
Thank you, Mr. Feifel. We'll have Arya follow up for 1 minute.
Okay, awesome. So listen, the people need funding now, not 6 months from now, not a year from now. The presidential fund puts a lot of money in the hands of students. The way it works is that there's a lot of checks and balances and accountability with this system. When the president makes a decision, the board gets immediately notified. The board has the power to immediately overturn the decision of the president, actually, with a majority vote. So the system is designed to be efficient, right? Your club needs funding now. They don't need to be sitting around, scratching their head. What I can do is offer thousands of dollars in funding to clubs who request it by sending a budget to me, a proposal to me, and we can open the doors and give it, right? Look, our team is experienced. We have the president, the VP, we have many members of the board. We know how the system works. We know what we have, right? You have to ask yourself, who is here capable of delivering? Our team can. Our plans are doable. That's why we're running with them. And we have the capabilities to fund the clubs. The presidential system is effective, and it puts money in the hands of clubs right now, right here.
Thank you very much. We will now go to Mr. Raman, and we'll ask you, what experience have you had advocating for university officials and to university officials, and what effective advocacy looks like to you?
I guess in terms of my actual experience, it's fairly limited. I haven't really had much experience working with WUSA or any sort of governance structure like this for universities. But I think that being an independent candidate puts me in a very unique position where I'm able to sort of work with and I guess really hear the different sides that many different teams or other directors that that will I definitely think will be able to provide super valuable insight. And I guess sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, I guess being in being able to hear any sort of side from that, and also it's my actual experience with WUSA is more relating to my experience with WUSA as a student. While I'm sure everyone here has had experiences with WUSA as a student, I think that being parts of many different clubs, I've gotten to hear a lot of different perspectives on how WUSA operates, and from the student side. And I think that having that sort of approach to it is is a very sort of unique selling point that I'm able to bring to the table.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, I have a question specifically for Mr. Razmiju. Your platform says, your platform slogan is it's time to change the status quo. 5 out of the 7 members running for board on your team are current directors. In what way does your team reflect a change in the status quo?
Look, we have many experienced people, but we have also many new people like myself who are coming in. Look, what we need is a majority. Our team can deliver that, right? It doesn't matter if I get elected alone or whoever gets. What you need is a team that believes in your policies and you have the votes necessary to pass the legislation you need, right? So what we can deliver is actually the numbers necessary to pass the policies we want to see, so we're not sitting there negotiating for months and months and months and months. So change can happen right here and right now. That's why changing the status quo. That's why when I picked my team, I found the most dedicated and committed members of the board, and I brought them on board. That's why I picked the most achieved members of our student community and brought them in my team and from the board, right? It reflects who we have. We have students from every single faculty within our support caucus and our representatives, right? And that's why we believe a comprehensive view is what's needed, and that's what my team will deliver. I'm very proud of my team, and our majority will allow us to change the status quo because we will have the votes necessary to pass the policies that everybody wants to see in this community.
Follow up, and because this was a follow-up to a follow-up, we'll only have 30 seconds for this. We understand that your team is experienced. We understand that your team has a representation from different faculties. What specifically we're curious about is how a team comprised of primarily current members of the board reflects the change in status quo. Thank you.
Yes, they reflect the change in the policies, right? Every member of my team is committed to the policies that I'm pushing, right? We have a committed team. That's what's gonna, the change in the status quo is the change in the status quo in the sense of our policies. We can actually pass things forward, okay? We need experienced people too. If you wanna have a whole bunch of non-experienced people on the board, nothing's gonna get done. It's gonna take them 6 months just to learn how the system operates. We know how the system operates. We have the votes necessary. If we get a majority, that's how we can actually pass things. Many of the members of the board, how did we get things like Roundtable? Alex, a member of my team, proposed that and pushed it forward. How did we unlock hundreds of thousands previously available for funds
Thank
for
you.
clubs? Yeah.
Moving on. So I know some of our candidates had said that our questions were too broad, so I think they'll be happy with our upcoming questions. WUSA has been due an equity audit for 3 years now. Will this be something, will this be a priority for you when you take office? Let's begin with Ms. Feifel.
Hi, that's quite an interesting question. It's something that personally I'm much more experienced with the financial side, but yeah, it's something that's valuable to check out. But more than that, I think something that we often see an issue with is when we're doing something like an equity audit or we're looking at diversity or inclusivity on campus, we're kind of ignoring what that actually means. And it generally doesn't mean just a diversity of students. It doesn't mean sort of a unified opinion about everything. It's about making sure that we're getting into the nooks and crannies and making sure that we're getting all voices heard and all voices respected. And that's something that I think when we're going through something akin to an equity audit, we have to not only consider, but more than that, we also have to be worried about what equity actually refers to, which overwhelmingly means it's expensive and it's challenging and it makes us uncomfortable. And this is something that I know from my face will be something that will put me in an uncomfortable situation, but I'm willing to put in the effort to make sure that I'm treating all students with respect and that we're going to the appropriate clubs, the appropriate resources to get everyone who makes a change on campus included and treated with the respect they deserve.
Thank you. Moving on to Mr. Raman.
Could you repeat the question?
WUSA has been due an equity audit for 3 years. Would this be a priority for you if you take office, and if so, how would you approach it? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It would definitely be a priority for me. One of the biggest priorities for me is addressing the needs of students that, the needs of students that are often neglected the most, which again, it is almost always going to be students with disabilities, students that struggle, with disabilities, especially because it's such a competitive school. Being a student with a disability in this sort of competitive environment is often very challenging, and it sort of it's like I said, it's very isolating, and a lot of people, it's an issue with the culture, with the fact that a lot of people don't even, realize that disabilities are more than just what is visible. Not everyone who's disabled is someone, with a walker or a cane or in a wheelchair. Regarding, an equity audit, I want to see not just a sort of, an understanding of demographics and understanding of, where these issues lie, but also I want students to understand that that a lot of these issues, a lot more pervasive and prevalent than they than they might, than they might initially believe, right? And I guess that would be sort of the direction that I'm going to be heading in towards.
Thank you. And moving on to our last answer.
Okay, woo, it's a miracle. We all agree. Woo. So it's awesome. Yes. There needs to be. I think I'm just as committed as anyone else on the stage to that. I think that's reflected in our team too, the diversity we represent. So it's important to have equity. It's important to have opportunity for all members of our community, and we are just as dedicated to pushing forward with that and ensuring that that is reflected both within WUSA and the wider university community as much as we can.
Thank you. All right. Well, we're moving on to a question that I'm sure it's on many of your minds in the audience. It's been a hot topic for a while now. Student engagement with WUSA has been low for the past few years, or even several years now, with many uncompetitive elections, historically low general meetings, and lack of awareness of WUSA's overall services and many other things. What steps will you take to address this low engagement? You have 3 minutes for this question, and we'll start with Raphael.
First and foremost, I think I don't blame the students at all for not wanting to be engaged with WUSA. I do not at all. And I think one of the bigger problems actually lies with the lack of communication that we have, the lack of transparency, the fact that WUSA can sort of make sweeping changes and large decisions that affect these services, these societies, these clubs, without any sort of justification, without any sort of explanation, and this sort of leaves these student leaders in the dark. And when these student leaders have to sort of relay these changes to the students that that rely on them to be leaders, they have no answer for it. And the fact that they have no answer for it is like, who can you blame for that, right? And I guess one of my biggest priorities is sort of just giving more autonomy to these student organizations, we want students to trust WUSA, but trust goes both ways, which means WUSA needs to learn how to trust these students as well. I want to, as much as possible, take WUSA's hands off of these student-run organizations. Make these student-run organizations actually feel like they're student-run. put the power back into the hands of the students. Let them decide sort of the direction that they want to go into. I guess specifically. I guess that goes for what events and not just events, but sort of like certain positions on different issues. Students should have, and these student-run organizations should have that sort of freedom to, I guess, speak and do as they actually wish to do, instead of just following instructions given to them by board of directors without explanation, without justification, and just hope and pray that the students that rely on them continue to trust them and continue to be okay with that.
Thank you, and on to Arya, to your right.
Awesome. So yes, there is an engagement issue that's visible today by a number of people in this audience. That's visible today by a number of people who probably will watch this video. How do we resolve that? Well, let me tell you, we have a lot of hardworking people in the marketing department, but I got to up their game a little. And we have a couple of solutions when it comes to this, frankly. We're going to launch a Discord server, actually, so individuals can actually get joined and see what WUSA is doing, how it's going to function. We are going to get involved in orientation, so the first-year students who get here, much more involvement, so to understand what WUSA is, how it functions, how to get involved with it, so we can keep that trend moving and going. Look, a lot of it comes down to the student leaders as well. We need to be out there meeting with students, shaking their hands, telling them that we are members of WUSA and what WUSA does for them. That is also why we need to put out constant reports to students about what we're doing and how we're going about doing that, right? That is something we're committed to, and that's something that definitely we're going to push forward for. A good communication standard is one that is comprehensive. Now look, WUSA is like a small municipal government. People don't like engaging with municipal governments, generally speaking, but this doesn't mean that we cannot have adequate engagement. You don't need a revolt of a governance system or structural complete changes that are going to cost money and take years to implement. What you need is passion, strong advocacy, and putting yourself out there so students can see you. So we're definitely going to introduce these things by being more relevant on social media, by pushing stronger on things like using learns or email chains to inform our students about what we're doing, and also getting more involved with things, again, like orientation, so that when the new group comes in, they feel that WUSA is a part of their community, and they are a part of the community subsequently, okay?
All right, and lastly, to Nick.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I want to say, first of all, that I concur with Raphael here. Things like getting WUSA involved with orientation aren't necessarily a great use of resources when we should be trusting this to individuals who already have this experience, who are already doing a great job. And that's something that I think we see echoed through a lot of the way that WUSA is structured. We already have mechanisms for getting Discord servers to people. These structures already exist for Senate caucus. It's behind the scenes. It's not official. It's there. We're talking all the time. It's something that is deeply frustrating, and it's something that I feel like is the wrong direction. And something that I've echoed for years going through the governance changes, that a huge problem with engagement at the University of Waterloo isn't WUSA communication. It isn't even the structure of WUSA. Overwhelmingly, it's that we're not doing anything. WUSA goes forward every day and presents minor changes that get overruled by something that co-op does without any oversight and that we can't change. This is something that is demonstrably driving students away. We don't have an issue with apathy at the university. We have an issue with boredom. Students want to get involved. They want to form small societies. They want to have places that they can go where they can experience others and make sure that they feel seen. And we're not providing that to them. We're trying to centralize things when we need to be looking to these resources that already exist. And that's something that I think my team already has experience in. We have a lot of experience with advocacy, but overwhelmingly, that's not institutional. We've gone out there and we've grown clubs. I'm the club president for Lettuce Club at the moment. That's a club that started from nothing, and we've grown it without any resources from WUSA. Yeah, club funding is an issue, but overwhelmingly what we're seeing as an issue is that WUSA isn't meeting students where they are. And that's something that we need to meet more of, and we need to continue, me and my team, to lead by example. Transparency and all of these other aspects that we're trying to hope for are not necessarily just communication. Overwhelmingly, it's open disagreement. It's having a council, it's having a board that's willing to talk and willing to fight with each other in a way that's healthy, in a way that's productive, in a way that students make them feel seen.
Well, yeah, thank you to. Okay, did you say something about the Discord server?
It already exists.
Oh, it already exists. Okay, so you can respond
So,
for a
okay,
minute.
let me tell you something right now. First of all, giving orientation, first of all, isn't great, and it sucks. Let me tell you right now, from my experience, from experience everyone I've spoken to, getting WUSA more involved is giving students more voice. Currently, faculty dominates it. If we take it on, we can actually make sure that the students who volunteer the time for orientation are the ones who are actually participating and helping and setting up the plan, so we can have a more connected student body, right? Look, having a council is a structural change. It is, and it's going to take more legislation, more time, and guess what? More money. We already know that because we know when we took a transition what happened. The key here, again, is to be engaged with students. This is why we actually are looking to reform the club system, to make it easier for clubs to start, by cutting down the requirements, but actually working to create funding for them so they have the resources. A weak WUSA that can't do anything isn't going to support students. We need a strong WUSA that is advocating for students, who's directly there for students. And our WUSA executives meet with politicians and members of the university all the time. It's about actually letting students know that what they're doing and how they're doing it, okay? Open communication starts with trusting, believing, and opening our hands to others.
Okay, thank you very much. Would the other two candidates like to respond to?
Yeah, I think I would, but I'll try and keep this really quick because I know it's a response. It's something that going through this structural change, I've seen slowly degrade the ability of WUSA to have any advocacy. A lot of those committees that I mentioned earlier that I've sat on in the past do not exist anymore, and part of that is directly as a result of WUSA's structure slowly eroding itself over time. Why do we need HR changes? Because the former system, while it wasn't perfect, was at least a little bit better in our organization. One of the things that I strongly feel here is that, yeah, it's gonna be expensive, but we're gonna have to rip off this Band-Aid now rather than let the wound fester and make that much more expensive change in the future when we're not able to actually work for students for a number of years.
Thank you. And Mr. Remen, would you like to say anything? Okay, well, so in studying all three of your campaigns and in hearing you now, you've all mentioned an issue of transparency within WUSA. So we are wondering about specific, and I emphasize the word specific, policies that you want to enact while in office to improve transparency within WUSA. If anyone would like to start, please go for it.
I guess I'm holding the mic.
Just one thing, sorry. And also while answering this, please also address what specific issues with transparency you see currently, and how you, and again, with specifics, like how you plan on targeting them, because transparency is a broad issue, so we would love to know some specifics here.
You have a minute and a half.
Awesome. Transparency is created through communication. We just talked about it really quickly. When it comes down to it, we need to put reports out to the students so they can see what we're actually advocating for. A lot in this governance system that we have, which is a standard nonprofit system that almost everybody else uses, we get a lot done. A lot of advocacy is actually created. We have a lot of talk that we do. It's about letting students know by putting things like advocacy reports out there so we can see what we're working on and how we're achieving it. Transparency is created when the student leaders actually go out and engage with the student body, meet them, talk to them, right? This is why me and my team have been in SLC across this past week, meeting with people, talking to clubs, actually being out there and making ourselves known. That's how transparency is created, where people feel connected and there's adequate ways of getting back to them, right? Reports is one of them. It's the most effective way. So anyone can go and access on the WUSA website or through many of the other means that we distribute our information to see what we're actually doing and how we're achieving it. Yeah.
We'll move to your right.
Yeah. Sorry, about transparency. So one of the things that reiterating, I think is very important for transparency is actually getting rid of systems like cabinet confidences. Systems where all of the members of the board are expected to work together and to have the same opinion presented to students. That's not transparency. That's a closed off system that students can't interact with and they don't feel seen with. It's something that deeply frustrates me, and it's frustrated me for a while, but more than that, I think what it does is it prevents these communication methods that we have from actually getting out to students, but also it makes it harder for students to actually see leading by example happening and substantial change happening within WUSA and across the university in specific. When there are changes like at co-op, or we see improvements to the way that research funding is advocated, or velocity changes, these are not coming from WUSA, they're coming from outside because the current system doesn't allow us to actually talk about things.
Thank you. And lastly?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with both Arya and Nick on this. Like when they make when WUSA makes certain changes to for example, Glow Center has had an issue where they had just their hours slashed. and there was no explanation regarding this. There was just it was just some decision that was made, and when trying to communicate back and forth, they often just had many weeks of wait time to just have that sort of understanding, why is this happening, and not just that. When certain efforts are made for pushing for student interests, like let's say housing, or I guess or changes made to students co-ops. A lot of these decisions, again, come, as Nick said, come from outside of WUSA. But when these changes are made, students aren't given an explanation, and these conversations aren't allowed to happen. And when there is no explanation given to students, that is, I think, what builds a lot of that distrust, that feeling of not being heard. And it's again what Nick mentioned, where the cabinet confidence, where there's supposed to be a united front presented. I think that's absurd. I think that we should be encouraging difference in position. We should be encouraging a sort of this idea that each person on the board can have their own position and have their own different. I guess differences between one another, so that students with these specific interests can be able to know who to go to, who to voice their opinion for, and who they and be able to trust. Is this person actually going to push for things that affect me, right? That's, I think, absolutely some change that we need to see regarding transparency.
Okay, thank you. Sort of related to this, but if any of you would like to say more on the subject, we also hear the issue of trust between students to WUSA and also the other way around, WUSA to students. So I'm wondering, what is your strategy to gain back the trust of the student body in WUSA? And we can start with you.
Okay, so I guess I think it's going to be a very long and slow process. There's a lot of systemic issues within WUSA, including the current governance structure as well, that sort of have a lot of barriers, bureaucratic barriers to sort of being able to have that open communication. I guess expanding student trust, that sort of ties into transparency. Students need to be able to feel they actually know what's happening. They actually know the reasoning behind certain decisions that are made, even if that reasoning isn't something that makes people happy, even if that reasoning is something as simple as there's just not enough money. That's something that students need to hear. But not just that, we also need to feel even if those even if we hear no, we need to hear what now. We need to hear then what, because these problems still persist, and students aren't going to be able to trust in WUSA if they feel they're not being addressed, if all they're hearing is just radio silence on issues that they vote people in for, and until we see change in that matter, I don't expect students to trust WUSA at all.
Thank you, and moving on to your right.
So it's first important to understand how the system works. Cabinet confidentiality doesn't mean that directors cannot express personal opinions. It only means that if an official statement is put out by the organization or position is one that has the board's approval and one that actually goes through a majority vote type of system, okay? So when it comes to getting trust with students, okay, that is driven by actually putting a good hand and good faith forward, right? When we start delivering using a majority, which we will get on the board hopefully, we will actually see how we are engaging, right? Trust is created when you engage. We're not afraid of the student body, but you actually talk to them, you participate with them, you go and you consult with the different groups and organizations on our campuses to understand what it is they need, to understand what the support that they need and how we can get best, give that support to them. Trust is created when you put good faith forward and willing to speak and communicate with all members of our community, even the ones you may disagree with. That's how we build trust, and that's how we make a WUSA that truly represents every voice.
Thank you, and to your right.
Yeah, thank you. Trust is a tricky subject. It's something that you can lose really quickly, and it takes a very long time to gain back. And that's something that I don't think will be happening in my term. I don't think it'll be happening in any of my peers' terms. It's something that will take a very long time, and it requires a lot of work on our part to get done. Right now, do students trust WUSA? Obviously not. We have a governance change that was pushed through using that confidence of the confidence session to push through changes that were not popular even within the board, but barely squeaked by that line, and then was presented to students in a unified method that has fundamentally eroded what students feel is an appropriate way of dealing with governance. This is something that we should avoid in the future, something that should be removed, but more than that, shows a bad leading by example. It's a way of doing advocacy by almost bullying, by taking forward an idea and presenting it as though it's a totally unanimous decision by the board without properly addressing issues, without having that dissent within the board. But more than that, it's preventing students from actually seeing the change happen. It makes it seem like it was unanimous, like it was already there, like it was already decided upon, like they couldn't provide input. And that's something that I think, especially in our own advocacy and the advocacy of Team Renew, we've gone out of our way specifically to do. So Daoud, for instance, in getting Tinkerbait removed from the board, really reached out to students. The Waterloo Works posting board, of course. When we saw that Tinkerbait was acting inappropriately, that required a lot of effort, a lot of student organization to be able to actually get that moved forward. It's not about building trust from WUSA, it's about having students trust each other enough to build something better than what WUSA is now.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, we've heard a lot about the general concept of student engagement. I believe we have.
So I have a follow-up for candidate Razmaju. So you said that the way the current thing works is not necessarily, the way the current board system works is not necessarily, like you differed with Nick on whether like the closed door meetings and the unanimous is the best way to go forward or not. In particular, how would you address a concern where a motion passed by the board is brought to the general meeting, like the governance structure was done, and all board members were expected to support it at the general meeting, even though they may have had differing views at the board. Do you think this is an accurate representation of the way students voted and the votes of the students?
Yeah, so okay, the governance model change came and it was voted on by the students, almost like a referendum, and it passed because the old system, serious standardized system that many nonprofits and organizations use. We must understand that we cannot theoretically make up things from thin air or remove legislation and laws. We have to cooperate with the province and federal regulations, which we have. This governance model doesn't, stop anybody. When it comes down to it, the students chose this model. They voted for it, they pushed it, and majority, which is how democratic system works, chose it. And that's what we'll work on. I'm not looking to change this governance model. That's going to cost you money and time. I'm looking to use this governance model as efficiently as I can to actually get change done by getting funding in the hands of students, by getting the institution more independent from Waterloo, by addressing things like, yes, our communication issue, which is done when we reach out to students in good faith, which is done when we create new avenues of communication that have spoken about, right? That's how we fix the issues, not by structurally changing the entire institution.
Yeah, we'll get to just one thing. So one thing I want to just add context to, because this could be seen as misleading. So you said students voted on the new governance model, while to some extent true. WUSA general meeting has a quorum of 100 people right now. And WUSA has, and the majority at the general meeting could be reached by just WUSA staff. So even without getting to regardless of whether it was popular or not, this was something which may have passed. This has changed now, but so I just wanted to add that for factual correction. If you want to respond to that, you can. Otherwise, we can move to Nick.
It has a quorum of 100, but as many people as want can show up, right? So the quorum is only 100, yes.
Sure. Yeah, let's move on to Mr. Faifel. If you could talk about...
Just before we get there, I would want to point out that this was very much a compromised constitution, and while that staff made up the majority of it, the remainder was functionally the mass news caucus. And while they did get one compromise, yeah, I remember those meetings with you up there. Yeah, it was something that, while it was moved forward, was only through compromises that now are not being used appropriately and that don't reflect actually what students wanted out of their constitution. Sorry, the other question you had there.
Yeah, just in terms of can you point to specifics that in the current model that you believe that students don't want?
I would love to. So this is something that I've been frustrated with for a long time. And as Arya pointed out, this is something that a lot of nonprofits use, but not a lot of student societies use. It's something that's relatively new, and other societies that have adopted this model have already walked it back. They're not happy with it either. It's something that restricts us in a lot of ways. The province does add requirements, but those requirements do other negative things. Like, for instance, having refugees of certain types. Like, if you're a political refugee, you're unable to represent students on WUSA effectively. If you're bankrupt, now or in the past, I have a friend, and for instance, when she was about 6, she had her identity stolen, and now she's ineligible to run for WUSA because of provincial regulation. Our structure mimics the requirements of a non-for-profit corporation, but doesn't effectively allow for enfranchisement of students that have real experiences. This is something that I find deeply disturbing, and that there are other better ways of making sure that we can get those voices heard. Having a board that is so powerful isn't a benefit. We want a board that is there to ensure good operations, not necessarily to make all those decisions on their own.
So just to follow up, as you mentioned that these are provincial rules because of which they aren't able to do that. How do you plan on combating this at a student government level?
Yeah, I'll be clear. From the get-go, it's not possible. But we can make changes in the near future that will be substantially better. One thing that the Engineering Society and some other student societies use is a council and board model, which was the way that we previously worked to sidestep these rules. Through those sort of systems, you're allowed to have any students that are eligible to sit on those structures, and then have a board that can functionally act as a rubber stamp, as a veto on issues that come up. It's not perfect, it does add another body, but I believe students are smart enough to understand a structure of government that is almost identical to the federal government. This is something we're taught in 5th grade. We don't need to worry about a structure being too complicated when it's simply 2 systems, which is how almost all governments in Canada work. It's not that hard. We can make better changes that allow us to re-enfranchise real portions of our student body that currently are unrepresented and unable to be represented. That's not an appropriate way for us to run what is functionally a municipality.
Thank you. Moving on, so before we move on to the next question, I have a specific question for Mr. Rahman. The other 2 candidates running opposite you are running with teams. If they're potentially trying to not only win themselves, but also have a team which would support their policies at board, you would have to gain the support of any elected board members from scratch. How do you intend to go about doing that?
Well, I guess, I mean, the thing is about my platform is that it thankfully doesn't very much contest the other 2 candidates all that much. In speaking with both of their teams over and just I guess about their platforms over these past few weeks, I think that actually I am perfectly happy to work with them in the sense that a lot of their goals, a lot of their own policy changes that they want to enact are in line with sort of the things that I want to achieve. And I see no reason why we wouldn't be able to work, in tandem with one another.
Sounds good. So this allows me to move to my follow-up. So you said that your campaign overlaps with the other 2 candidates, who have teams running with them. At that point, why should a vote? How would you convince a voter to vote for you over them, given that they have the backing of a team?
Well, I guess it's the fact that I'm able to, I guess, hear, as I said, hear the, positions from both sides. I guess I have that sort of, middle ground approach. I'm perfectly willing to work with, either team in the, because I understand that, both teams, we all, like I said, we all share the same interests, which is just what we seem to be, what we find to be the best for best for the university, best for the students. Where I guess I guess I have that sort of unique advantage because I mean the thing is, of course they're able to work with one another. That's no secret. I mean, but it's sort of I mean I think one of the issues that we might encounter is that there might be that sort of from the president position, it might be helpful from both teams to sort of have that person leading the discussion that doesn't really have that bias towards one part of the board versus another part of that board.
Thank you. So let's moving on to our questions for all candidates now. How do you view the role of student-run societies in WUSA? In particular, there are 3 equity-based services that WUSA runs, Raise, Glow, and Women's Center. In the past, there has been contention regarding whether these services should be allowed to engage in advocacy or not, given given that their leadership is unelected in nature. How do you view this? How do you plan on supporting these services?
We'll start with Arya. And you have 2 minutes.
Excellent. These are incredibly important services, which definitely will have our support. When it comes to advocacies they should be free, to push for the changes they want to see, but that also means they need to be able to consult the board as well. We want our elected representatives to also be consulted in these things. I believe by having a good relationship with these organizations, we can achieve a lot. They do a lot of good things for our community. They're organizations that we want to fund and keep funding, and organizations that we definitely want to work with in a partnership with our elected officials who are elected by the students to come up with stances that reflect the entire body's opinion and an understanding. So that a lot of these issues we can all agree on. We need to ensure we have safe spaces on campus for our students. We need to ensure that equity and opportunity is available to everybody. And we need to call out when actions against our community is being taken place and not stay silent. So these things can be done, but with the consultation of the elected officials as well. So we have the element of democracy present in our system.
Thank you, and we'll move on to your right.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so not only do we have these 3 systems that, you can kind of just tell from the way I am, I'm no expert in, but more than that, we also have all of these other systems that are attached to WUSA, so the sub-societies, engineering society, science society, even arts society that exist to do advocacy in their own way, and that we already empower to allow for that effective advocacy. This is something that WUSA is really reliant upon now that it's a bit weakened from its previous state, and it's something that my team is very happy to allow to continue and further support them by asking them what they need from us. Students are a diverse group, but more than that, we're a group that is willing to learn and willing to grow in the future. And that's something that I think my team and other groups within the university need to be willing to adapt and respond to as time goes on. It's something that I think we often are divided about, especially when it comes to concerns like security and other things that on campus we react in a very animalistic way towards. But it often just drives a culture of fear, where we feel like there's others that we need to be scared of, there are others that we need to pen in, that we need to tell them no, when most of the time what we should be doing is relying upon their personal experiences, but more than that, the experiences of them as groups with actual time in this advocacy and seeing that progress happen. It's something that my team's excited to continue forward, and our process of decentralization of WUSA only allows us to be more efficient in allocation of resources in the future.
Thank you very much. We'll actually be asking a specific question about societies and WUSA's relationship with them a little later. But it's okay. We'll move on lastly to Raphael and ask about the services.
Right, could I hear the question again?
Yes, absolutely. So the first question is, how do you view the role of student services within WUSA? And then I guess a follow-up question that I'll ask everyone after is, do you plan on trying to improve or modify any of the services within the organization?
In particular with the services, what we were looking at is that there are 3 services as a whole, but specifically the 3 equity-based services which have in the past done advocacy. There has been contention on whether they should be allowed to do advocacy or not, given that their leadership is unelected. How do you view this? What are your opinions about this, and how do you plan on supporting these services?
Yeah, I absolutely think that these services should be able to do advocacy. I think that trying to sort of hold a united front, a sort of a shared opinion is going to be an impossible task. There's too much diversity, and I think trying to shut down that diversity in favor of a unified body is just all you get is just suppression across the board. You get everyone in all of these services just unhappy because we're just stuck following one sort of direction that they don't get to choose. And like I said, it goes back to giving these student leadership, these student organizations autonomy, taking WUSA's hands off. I think someone told me that it really feels like WUSA's guiding the hands of these services, but what we need is more sort of a gentle push in support, a gentle a nudge, I guess, rather than sort of someone telling them exactly, what to say, what to do. I think that we should let our diversity shine. I think that's, the best part about having such a large, student body, a large student organization is our differences. And if those differences cause contentions, so be it. Whether or not this is like actually possible regarding, I guess, liability and what these sort of organizations are supposed to represent in terms of WUSA, which is supposed to represent the entire, student body. I think there are ways around it. At the end of the day, I think that we need to highlight our differences rather than trying to suppress it in order to just try and represent everyone.
Thank you. So Abhiraj mentioned the fact that there was contention around the ability for these equity-based services to actually advocate. I'm wondering if you, and this is open to everyone, if you became president, would you do anything specific to change these services so that they either could advocate more effectively or do something better that you see? We can start with you and move to your right.
I think that the fact that these services must go through WUSA for permission regarding who they hire, what they say, what they post, I think that is just ridiculous, and it puts unnecessary pressure on WUSA because now we have to decide how can we be unified, how can we hold the stance of neutrality. I don't think that, especially when it comes to political advocacy, I don't think that neutrality exists. And I think that, trying to, I guess, hold that sort of balanced stance by, tightly regulating and policing these services, all it's going to do is just, hurt them and again, reduce trust. And this also ties back to trust, right? We can't expect these students to trust WUSA if WUSA doesn't trust these students to sort of act within what they view to be, the best way to behave, I guess, best way to advocate, best things to say, I guess.
Thank you. We'll move to your right.
Look, these services are also a part of WUSA. It's not us against them. We are all one community, and that's the way we need to look at it, right? Look, when it comes down to political advocacy or any advocacy of any type, it's about sitting down and actually talking to the people who are most involved in these clubs, seeing what they stand for, seeing what resources they need. Look, the board should be consulted. They're the elected officials, but that doesn't mean that the board is going to silence these groups. That's not how the system works. That is not what it means. It means that we sit down and together as a united body talk. That means us as the elected officials dedicating the time to these groups and sitting down and actually hearing them concerns, offering them our support. Look, we agree on a lot of shared, advocacy goals. I don't think it's going to be a vast difference between what Glo wants and I want, or our board wants. It's about hearing, listening, and offering a hand to help, because we are a united community, and it's about time to act like it.
We were talking about change, and this is something that I'm not going to try and pull an Alison Gregg and jokingly comment that, because women use the food bank, we should merge the two of them. No, we should be empowering these organizations and really following forward in encouragement of our growth of equity, diversity, and inclusivity. But more than that, we have to recall that equity comes from effective work in making sure that we see those outcomes that reflect the population and are proportional and respectful of these groups. It's something that at current doesn't reflect the university practices to totally clamp down on. And it's a part of WUSA, but it's a part of WUSA in the same way that a lot of disagreements are part of WUSA. It's something that when we shy away from, we shirk the responsibility of, but then we have to then take the blame for our inaction for when things go wrong. If we choose not to grow our community, and we're choosing to try and grow it from the top up when we know that the growth comes from the roots, it's distasteful and it's disrespectful to all of the work that our students put in making sure that their local environment, that their circles of friends are a positive way of experiencing the university, especially when it's so stressful as it is.
In the same way, so one of the Women's Center coordinators who last year when she was advocacy director had said that communicating with WUSA feels like a game of broken telephone. A lot of clubs have also complained regarding communication problems with WUSA. What would your approach, and this for all three candidates, what would your approaches be to solving these communications issues with clubs, services, and other WUSA stakeholders?
We can start with Arya.
So instead of going through a bureaucratic system, they can directly come to me. My email, my office. I am here for the clubs. That is my job as the president of the association to be there for you guys, right? Look, we have a bureaucratic system. It's time to cut the bureaucratic system, centralize things, and allow us to actually represent students, right? So they can get in touch with me anytime. This is why I'm running things like office hours. So any student can come and visit my office and talk to me about what they want and what they believe in and what they care for and what their concerns are, right? It's about streamlining this process by allowing them to directly contact the elected officials and allow the elected officials to use their elected power to help them with whatever they need. This is why we have offered more support for clubs through our new fundings, through our club registration reforms, all you can see on our website, right? This is why we are coming, because clubs are the fundamental part of this campus culture. Supporting them, growing them, and being engaged with them is our top priority. And my doors will always be open, so they can directly come to me instead of going through a bureaucratic system.
Just a quick follow-up. Could you tell us specifically what it means to cut the bureaucratic system, as you had just mentioned?
Well, listen, instead of going through 3 different email chains, you send an email directly to my office. You say, oh yeah, this is my concern, this is my problem. And look, I'm the president of the board, is also the chair of the board, the chief governing officer of the corporation, okay? That carries enough weight to be able to assist students. You tell me your concerns, you tell me your issues. If there's an advocacy area, the president is the perfect person to contact. Let us know, right? The person who is in these roles needs to be active in touching, listening, and hearing students. And that's done when the communication is directly between us and the clubs that are most in need.
So just to be clear, so you're saying, so right now when you say that voters can or the student body can directly reach out to you if you're elected, can voters take that to mean that you're pledging to be responsive to every communication that you receive?
But listen, when it comes to my inbox, I see it. If it's an operational thing, we delegate it, right? If it's an advocacy thing, I bring it immediately to the board, right? But when you come to me, you come to the chair of the board, right? So that's exactly where I can put your voice where it's
No, I
needed.
understand that, but the average student does not see what's going on behind the scenes till the time the result is done. So in the meantime, can they expect, the fact that you're asking them to come directly to you instead of going through all these chains, can they expect communication back from you directly?
Of course. This is actually one of the policies we're running on. We want to get to a point where we have a 7 business day response rate at WUSA. Now we're going to try to get the operations of this going. That means a lot of hiring, a lot of reworking on some fronts. Look, when I was working with WUSA, I had an easier time reaching to deans and the federal government and getting responses from WUSA itself. There's no operational mandates on when emails need to be sent, who's replying to who when, right? Streamlining this is going to help us. So I think this is why a 5-year plan is good, because we can put it as one of our goals. But I'm expecting to set an operational mandate that gets us within 7 business days. When you send an email to anyone in WUSA, a response is immediately followed up. So the student knows that at least we got your email and we're working to resolve any issues that you had. Yeah.
Yeah, so just for once again, my question was regarding the communications issues. So a Women's Center director had said that communication with WUSA feels like a game of broken telephone. Clubs have complained about communication issues with WUSA. Other stakeholders have brought up issues with WUSA and communication. How would you address these communication issues?
Yeah, this is something that has impacted us personally. At current, I'm a club president. One of our team members, Emma, is a former club president, and this is something that we encounter a lot. How often do club presidents come across a situation where you're trying to have a club meeting and you're not assigned a room until an hour before? Yeah, it is a problem, and one of the major problems from this are when you're trying to communicate with WUSA, it goes through this full structure. We've set it up in such a way that there are massive delays. It didn't used to be like this. The council was an effective way of making sure that advocacy got there directly. But more than that, we can't just rely on a single office. We can't rely on just a small number of students. People are really busy. If they're doing effective advocacy, they should be in meetings all day, getting those opinions across to the appropriate people to make those changes happen. We can't rely on one person to do all of the work of the organization. That's irresponsible, and it's not a great way of getting things done. It's something that, unfortunately, we've been forced into by our own incompetence in a way. These rules, this bureaucracy that we've built up comes from the province, and it's something that is very frustrating, but is a large part because we don't trust students. If we go out of our way to make sure that students are trusted, that students that we know have done well in the past are able to continue to do well with the support of the organization without having to double check them before they go and do it, we can get much more done. For these big issues that we need to resolve now, we can't make incremental change. All of these systems are so slow at responding, and having one person who sits on boards that are overwhelmingly filled with profs who don't care about student interests, it's mind-blowing to me that this is an acceptable way of running an organization. It's something that I feel overwhelmingly what we focus on is punishment here. We're trying to punish students for screwing up as opposed to seeing this as from a growth mindset to make sure that students in the future are better able to get things done, and that we work with organizations outside of the university and outside of WUSA to see those changes happen, especially when they're so effective at it.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to Raphael. Would you like us to repeat the question, or?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So my question was that there have been many communications issues with WUSA. I brought up how an advocacy director for Women's Center, who is currently a coordinator, had said last year that her exact quote was that communication with WUSA is like a game of broken telephone, as has been brought up multiple times during the conversations by the candidates, as well as across the clubs have issues with communicating with WUSA. Other WUSA stakeholders have brought up issues with communicating with WUSA. How do you plan on approaching the communication gap that is seen in WUSA right now?
Right. I think that, the issue of communications and the fact that they take too long is something that absolutely anyone who has had any experience trying to communicate with WUSA probably experiences. And I think largely this is in part due to the fact that, because we feel the need to sort of have our hands on everything, we don't really want to give, it boils down to giving students autonomy. That will, I guess, lighten our load. If students and student leaders and student organizations didn't have to go to WUSA for permission for every single little thing regarding booking a room, regarding, organizing events, or just, I guess, whatever reason they might have, if we gave, if we put these decisions in the hands of, the students, giving them, just the power to do things without going to us for permission every single time, we would be less overwhelmed. I really appreciate something that I've talked to Arya a little bit about, was just improving that sort of communication, speeding that process up. Obviously, there are going to be a lot of things that will require WUSA's WUSA's go ahead, WUSA's permission. That's not surprising. But I guess having that, be able to be done in a timely manner should absolutely be on the forefront of our priorities. But I think the first step is going to be just, I guess, putting more trust into students and these student leaders to sort of do what they need to do without having to, again, go to us for every single thing. I guess.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll go to a very similar question. So much like WUSA's relationships to services and clubs, the relationship between WUSA and societies has often been unclear. So I'm wondering if you would like to change WUSA's relationship to student societies such as the Engineering Society or the Art Student Union, and how will you go about doing this? And we'll start with Mr. Feifel. You have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I've worked with the Engineering Society in the past, and one of the big things that really frustrated me here was the restrictions that WUSA was putting on our ability to actually get advocacy done. One of the big things that we wanted to do is to take forward issues to co-op and work on it and to get things done for students, because unfortunately, there are lots of issues with co-op. But one of the problems we continuously have is that we get requirements and restrictions on scope, what we're allowed to talk about, what we're allowed to deal with, something that doesn't make a lot of sense, especially when it's still impacting us. When we want to talk about issues when it comes to our TAs, when we want to talk about issues about abusive tenure, this is something that comes up, unfortunately, very often within engineering, to often disastrous consequences. It's something that WUSA steps in and says, you can't do that, that's our job, and then they don't make a decision on it. It's something that student societies should be empowered to do, and student societies in some ways already have the ability to do, but they're not supported in it. Our VP academics need to be able to go out there, have some of the resources of WUSA available to them, and the information from WUSA to make these decisions on their own, especially when it's an issue related to their faculty and their faculty alone. And this is something that is deeply, deeply frustrating. We have some of these channels already in place, but they're not well reinforced and they're not well utilized. We see a lot of bureaucracy coming in from requiring specific ways of communication or having restrictive chair models that prevent students from being able to talk to other faculty to get things done. One of the things I've been very proud of seeing recently is the MASSOC president of this term going out there to get information about withdrawals. That's something that, while he's approached other people about, I don't see a lot of WUSA support on. It's something that the societies are working on and the Council of Presidents is working on, but we don't see echoed through WUSA's official channels. There is no coordination between the two of them, and overwhelmingly students associate themselves more with their student societies in their faculty than WUSA, because WUSA doesn't do a good job of listening to the student societies when they know that they are right.
Thank you. We'll move on to Raphael.
Yeah, I definitely very much agree with Nick on this matter. I think, again, I keep saying this, but giving these student organizations autonomy, there are a lot of concerns that we sort of have jurisdiction over that very obviously would be much better handled by those their respective societies. A lot of issues are specific to certain faculties, and trying to have that sort of purview over every single matter that they need to discuss just slows things down, and it's no wonder that we can't get anything done. It's no wonder that trying to just get an email or response back takes weeks, sometimes months. I guess, take our hands off of those student organizations, make student-run organizations actually student-run.
Okay, and Arya?
So we work in a federal system, right? Our societies are a backbone of what we have, okay? So yes, things like the Council of Presidents are great. The president of WUSA sits in it, right? These are fantastic mechanisms to engage with these groups. Yes, we need to empower them. Yes, we need to support them, right? But this means that we need to set up new communication channels, official communication channels, where we can actually continuously engage in dialogue with the heads of our societies. For example, if a new president of, NSOC or Arts Student Union is elected, the president of WUSA should immediately reach out, say, hi, I'm the president of WUSA. How can I help, right? That's the key. So it's a partnership. It's not one side dominates the other, or one side can do whatever they want without the other. It's a partnership, and we have those partnerships through dialogues, through sitting, in committees and talking about where we want to focus. There's a lot of issues students face, specifically with academics in this university, right? The university reversed its policies with respect to public information. Things like UW Flow don't work now, right? Rating your professor isn't as easy as it used to be. These are things that we need to turn. This starts by actually getting momentum, by consulting societies, helping them, talking to them, so we can reverse policies or administrative decisions like this. So we can actually have a society and a university that allows for student voices to be heard and engaged. Okay, so the presidential, the Council of Presidents is a great thing, but it's only one step in moving forward. The sitting chief governing officer needs to actively meet with these people. It's a system based on precedents. You need to set the precedents, right? I'm committed to meeting with the heads of every society, talking to them, asking them what they need and offering that support, right? And further growing our relationships with them by setting it into motion. So the people who come to my office in future years continue this type of work by good faith and by negotiating and having the conversations.
Thank you.
We can move forward.
That's your time. Thank you.
So, okay, actually, before we move forward to the next question, there's one specific question regarding societies. Mr. Feifel, your platform says that you want to revive the ASU. A, what does that mean given that the ASU already exists? And B, does this mean that if elected under your tenure, WUSA would intend to focus more on one faculty society than the other ones?
Yeah, so this is something that we came across during our campaigning because the ASU was wiped off the internet. I think that's one of the big things that we saw from them is, oh my goodness, they do exist, but at least when you're outside of arts, it's unable to be reached. If you look at their boards in Arts Lecture Hall, they are still representing people from 2020. It was very difficult for us to actually be able to establish communication until we made this mistake and are now being able to further our progress and our understanding of what's going on there because it is so opaque. At the moment, they're relatively small and trying to revitalize themselves in a similar way to the SciSoc has already completed. We're very happy to see them around, but it did take us screwing up once to be able to realize, oh man, they're back. And that's a very important step in being able to continue our dialogue in the future and making sure that they receive the support they need. And especially that if people are trying to communicate with them, they're able to be found. And that's something that from an outside of arts perspective is very important to make sure that when we're dealing with larger issues across campus, everyone is engaged, everyone is involved, and everyone is providing respectful input.
Thank you. Moving on, many students have raised concerns with mental health issues at school, and the way and have not been satisfied with the way the university responds to them. A 2011 report from the VP Academic VP Provost Academics office pointed out concerns with mental health at school, which was also seen in a similar report that was produced by their office last year. How would you work with the university to address mental health concerns that students may have?
We can start with Raphael.
I guess improving student mental health issues, or I guess addressing it. One of the bigger things is sort of, I guess, being able to, giving them the avenue to sort of, I guess, reduce their stress. This can come from, financial stress, but also academic stress. I mean, there's a lot of when students are struggling with these, mental health issues, a lot of times that they have those obstacles. I recall the 2021 accessibility report. 41% of students or something like that felt that a lot of professors weren't accommodating enough, or could have provided more effective accommodations in their classes. And I think to a large degree that that has to do with the fact that a lot of professors don't sort of have that sympathetic perspective on students that are struggling with those issues. And not just that, but also improving health services. I think that there should be a sort of investigation on, I guess, we should at least explore why health services are lacking, why we're allowing them to be, why they're so slow, why so many people have to wait in, I think some people are saying several weeks, sometimes months long queues just to sort of see a sort of counselor. I mean, these bureaucratic inefficiencies, I mean, is one of the biggest obstacles in that are keeping us from actually helping. But beyond that, there's also the lack of a community that we have here. Students can't actually reach out to each other. We don't want students just relying on the university to take care of them. We also want to build that sort of community where students can rely on one another, and students have that sort of shared sense of care for each other. And I think building that community comes down to sort of rebuilding a sort of, I guess, a shared, improving, clubs and everything. Sorry.
Thank you very much. That's your time. Yes, moving on.
Awesome. So yes, one part of combating mental health is having a more social atmosphere. This is why we want to get a pub fund running. This is why we want to give funding to clubs so they can run good, well-rounded events that involves community, so people can come to it and find each other, right? But a big part of it also is to ensure there's adequate funding for mental health in this university. This university is building new buildings. Its top executives. The president of the university is paid $500,000 in salary, but they can't hire 2 more psychologists. It's ridiculous. So this is where we need to sit in and actually advocate and negotiate and sit down and talk in good faith with the university and tell them that, look, we have a horrible mental health situation at Waterloo. And there's a lot of factors that drive to it. It's a hard school, no one denies that. But that doesn't mean that students should be left not supported. This means investing in areas like mental health. This also means when we're doing provincial and federal advocacy, mental health is a priority. We talk to our elected representatives about the situation that our students are facing every single day. So they understand the costs of lives that their lack of funding and support is actually creating. So it's a comprehensive approach, but it's an approach that we need to have socials, yes, we need to have community engagement, but those are driven from our policies, from our funding, from our opening of social areas around the campus, but it's also actually talking about these issues openly and loudly and not being afraid, okay? That's also a big part of it.
And lastly, to Nick.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is something that my team is very passionate about, and we are already working on, and we will continue to be working on in the future. I'll point to, again, the fact that that RITA helped remove that 6-session limit on mental health appointments, as well as my own experience in trying to update our privacy documentation for health services, which still had a digital privacy standard that relied on destruction of CDs. It's like 2005 era. It's very inappropriate for the modern era, and it doesn't actually accurately represent what students need out of their services. This is something that I think we can't throw money at this point. We already have an infinite pool of money. We've run out of therapists in the Waterloo region. It's not a matter of spending more money on this. There's no more money to be found because everyone's already employed. There aren't enough therapists. We can't just throw money at this issue. Instead, we need to be dealing with other things. We need to be dealing with root causes. Issues like academics being too burdensome. And while systems like tenure allow profs that have issues with them to continue forward, we can be a carrot to the stick model and make sure that when profs do well, they're rewarded for it. This is something that we've pioneered in the engineering faculty, and we'd like to see expanded elsewhere. And in addition to that, we also are leading by example when it comes to places like third spaces, ways that we can have students relax, build those community networks, and ensure that they're being properly treated. So that's through funding things like WEEF, like the Student Life Engagement Fund, and making sure that we're not spending money on just big events, one-time things that help you find maybe one person in your life. We're not a big sports school. We need to create growth organically in such a way that we can further our research interests, further our innovation, further the creativity that students bring forward. It's something that is frustrating because we've already hit the wall on. We need to think of side solutions in addition to just money. There aren't enough therapists in the region. We need to start dealing with the root causes.
Thank you to all three of you.
I have a follow-up for Mr. Feifel. So you said we need to prioritize where we're putting in our money, and an example you gave was that we're not a big sports school. Does that mean, but at the same time, while we may not be a major sports school, there are students who do engage in varsity athletics, including people who've gone on to play in professional leagues. Would you say that it is appropriate for us to advocate to move money away from activities that do help in the professional and personal growth of students?
So this is something that I think while it appears on the surface to be a really insightful approach, it's a bit misguided. And one of the reasons for this is that a lot of the students that find success in sports aren't receiving funding from students in the first place. They're not on the football team. They're on something like crew or other teams that don't receive student funding. These are clubs, not varsity teams. Varsity teams are relatively few in number. They're very, very expensive, and they don't support a lot of students. We have entire like huge amounts of students that engage with sports and athletics, but none of them are through the varsity system. We're using club systems. We're not actually throwing money at these students where we see success, where we see community building. We're throwing it at traditional sports in which students don't excel at Waterloo. We need to be funding things that we do well in, that we can be proud of, and actually see that growth out of students. Varsity sports are not the answer. They haven't been the answer, and I don't think they will be the answer for students moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Just want to given some factual context here, you're welcome to respond to that if you like. It may not be, I wouldn't be accurate to say that we haven't seen any varsity teams do well. Trey Ford, for example, and his brother were both football players who are playing in the Canadian Football League right now. So there have been those, and regardless, there's also the aspect of personal growth that some students may bring up with regard to sports or any other activities where student money goes.
Yeah, but overwhelmingly, Abrash, that's not because they were on a varsity team. That's because they got engaged in community activities. And most of the community activities that we're creating, most of the success we see from students are not on varsity teams. We have a very small number of examples where it's worked out really well, but overwhelmingly, when we see success, it's because of students' drive, not because they've been thrown money at.
Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to a university administration issue, and I'm sure everyone has heard that in December, the University of Waterloo announced a $15 million budget deficit in the last fiscal year. And so we're wondering, if you're president, how will you protect students from seeing the sort of budget cuts that the university administration is certainly thinking about? How will you ensure that student life and student success is continued even with this budget that exists now? Arya, we'll start with you. We'll give you 2 minutes each.
Awesome. So first of all, clubs are not going to see any cut to them because we have our funds, like the presidential fund, we're going to have that. Yes, look, it's a tough economic time for our country. The university is entering into a deficit. It's going to expand continuously over the years at the rate we're going. This is why our provincial government needs to be putting their fair share. Okay, this is why when it comes to provincial and federal advocacy, we go out there and we negotiate and we talk to our politicians about the costs that it's taking. If we want to continue the same standard of education that Canada has, the government needs to put their fair share funding in there. Okay, look, the university cannot find millions or billions of dollars worth of saving, no matter what the provincial government wants to say. So we're going to work actively with one of our policies actually is to get registered lobbyists and get a much stronger lobbying group actually going here, so we can actually go out there and get people who are experienced in lobbying and use lobbying tactics to get politicians to listen to us and hear our voices more effectively, right? That's built on our advocacy front that we are pushing for. Look, the deficit is going to hit, definitely when it comes to the Senate and when it comes to the position that WUSA possesses, and when it comes to protecting students, not administrative, that's on the university side. We will always stand against any cuts that can damage anybody. We and our team will use every vote we have to stand against them. But realistically speaking, the university dominates majority of the votes in all of these committees and in the Senate. But we will always, vote against any cuts can damage our students. And we will continue advocacy to make sure that the provincial government, which is at its cause, puts in the money that is needed to ensure that we have adequate funding for higher education in Ontario and frankly across this country.
Thank you. We'll move on to your right.
Yeah, just to start off, we should be correct in stating that no, it's not a $15 million deficit. It was a $15 million projected deficit into this year. It was closer to $23 million as a result of Bill 128 and the way that the budget model was associated.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No worries.
I think regardless, the point stands.
Yes,
though,
the point stands that it's a huge expense, but in a very weird way, it's only a sign of things to come. The university is relatively financially resilient. We don't have to expect cuts to students in the near future. We're expecting about a 0.3% reduction in each department's individual funding. Ideally, that's less than will be required to actually remove profs and TAs at this point, but it is not a good sign. And this is something that the international student cap has only exacerbated. I don't know if you've seen the data recently, but we're anticipating not only a flatlining of funding, but a reduction in funding while inflation continues to brutalize the university. The projection today was about $100 million in less than 10 years in deficit, which would financially ruin the university. This is something that I don't think we can expect the Ford government to actually respond to. It's something that they've already stated they will not listen to. They've totally ignored the Blue Ribbon panel. They've ignored the opinions of experts. I think what we would rather be doing is proving that we are right. Being there when universities start to fail and being able to have the information and how we need to recover. We're already $1 billion behind on deferred maintenance. We're gonna lose E2 soon. It will just be gone. As in no power supply, the steam tunnel failure, in addition to corridors in DWE that are already failing. This is not an occurring disaster, it's a disaster that has already happened, and we are relatively powerless in dealing with. It's something that my team would love to advocate on, but we can't expect success here because our current government isn't willing to provide that success. They're not willing to turn their investment now into profits in the future. They want to see us fail, and we have to understand that they are coming forward in a hostile way. Advocating for an increase in the grant is a positive way of working about things, but we shouldn't expect success. We should be preparing for the worst.
Okay. Moving on lastly to Raphael.
Yeah, I think that regarding these sort of deficits and being able to keep that from actually affecting students, like Nick said, it's already affecting students, right? And it's already affecting a lot of student organizations. And I think that this is an issue that that goes beyond sort of like I guess the scope of just the university, and it goes beyond just the municipal level, and it goes beyond I guess a lot of what we're able to do here. But if there is a way to sort of advocate for it, I think that Arya makes a great point about employing certain lobbying strategies to sort of advocate nonetheless. Do I have optimism that the provincial government will actually respond and take heed to our requests and actually address the issues that we're talking about? I'm not that optimistic about it. But at the very least, I think that there should definitely be an effort, and we absolutely need to be prepared for what is going to come, and it's the fact that things are going to probably to some degree get worse, and I think that's just going to happen, unfortunately. But
thank you. I have a follow-up for candidate Razmiju here. So one thing that you brought up was that you said that you want to work with lobbying groups. Does this are you referring to the lobbying groups that WUSA works with currently, like WUSA, or are you planning on working or expanding the lobbying groups that we work with?
So yes, our federal and provincial advocacy groups are fantastic currently, okay, but most of the people on them are the student representatives, they're not registered lobbyists. So it's about expanding and getting actual lobbyists who have experience working with politicians. That is an asset. If not, you're just talking to some random politician, I mean, what difference is that gonna make? Lobbyists who actually know what they're doing, bringing them on board. I mean, it might cost a bit, but again, we have worked out it. I think it's very financially feasible for us to do. And actually put that forward so we can get those changes, okay? It's about expanding on what we have, because leaving it and then being pessimistic isn't gonna fix any issue. We need to have optimism, we need to put our efforts forward and actually advocate so our voices are being heard.
Thank you. Next up, I have a question for candidate Faisal. Throughout the course of this evening, as well as over your on your platform, you have said that the system, a unicameral system that we have within the board and without two different bodies of government is something that frustrates you. However, you have not taken the next step and said that you plan on changing it back to a bicameral one. So is that something on your radar? If not, how do you plan on addressing the issues that come with the unicameral system?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, one of our first moves would be making sure that advocacy is not part of day-to-day operations, but rather directly under the board. That's something that we can get done quite quickly, and that we expect to be a substantial change while we can prepare for a longer-term fundamental change in the structure. It's something that I think we're open to exploring, and we would like to get done, but we know how stressful a governance change can be, and that it might not necessarily be appropriate, especially if students aren't actually looking forward in the current year. Something that very much frustrated me with the last time that we went through a governance change is that the board was not open to listening to students on this. And that's something that we very much need to change about our operations and the way that WUSA works. So while we would like to be able to change the system, we recognize very much so that it is not the place of like 13 students to exercise the will in this specific case where all students are engaged, and it is about the way that they are organized, and have that be fundamentally changed without adequate input, without adequate restrictions on how things are running. It's not a fair way of executing change, and it's not a fair way of moving forward.
Next up, I have a specific question for candidate Razmiju. Earlier during this debate, I had brought up your campaign slogan, "It's time for a change in status quo." At that point, we had said, we had looked at your membership, and in response, you had said that it is your policies which reflect a change in status quo. May just be me, but for my peace of mind and for my clarification for anyone who shares my doubts, your policies that you have talked about today do not seem vastly different from the status quo as some of your opponents' policies might. Can you give specifics as to what policies reflect a change in status quo? You have a minute and a half for this.
Get an in-house HR that taking control over our workers is changing the status quo. Putting the presidential fund to get funding actually for clubs is changing the status quo. Look, changing the governance system is going to be expensive, takes time, and is unrealistic. We can use this system and make it slightly more efficient by, again, getting things like a new HR system that's controlled by us. By actually streamlining the process, we can have an effective system. It's about what we can do today to resolve the issues that the students are facing, versus having these theoretical thoughts about what is best. It's about what we can do to create actual concrete change today rather than tomorrow, right? Look, getting the Bob Shaler pub back up and running is changing the status quo. It's getting new stuff up here on campus, right? Creating better communication standards is changing the status quo. Everything we're doing is bringing change, and with our majority, we can vote these through and actually get concrete results, right? We are students who come from a wide range of backgrounds, a diversity of faculties represented in our team, right? We are bringing the voices together to actually have a truly representative board.
Okay. We have 10 more minutes left. Do you mind if I go ahead? So we're going to ask one more question before closing statements, and you'll have 1 minute each to answer this. So we've heard a lot from each candidate about what they want to change with WUSA, which obviously there's a lot of thoughts. But we're wondering if each candidate could summarize briefly what they believe the biggest win for WUSA has been over the last couple years, let's say the last 2 years, and how they plan on bringing that win into the future. Well, if any. We'll start with candidate Feifel.
Well, I think what we can be proud of, at least, are the fact that the clubs associated with the University of Waterloo have done a lot of great efforts in the past year. One of the things that I think we'd be most proud of is making sure that the GRT didn't implement those clawbacks on our schedule, made sure that we working with the NDP club, the Liberal club, the civil engineering students, the planning students, we were able to see that effective change to make sure that the GRT understood how important it is, not only to the operation of the university, but also the city and the economy of the region in general, it was to have that change. And that's one thing that I really would like to be a strong takeaway from my time with you today, that really grassroots organizations, so coming from a point of view where everyone understands the issue and is willing to work together, is much more effective than something specific like advocating for lobbying or other sort of backdoor methods of getting things done. That's not an effective form of transparency, and it's not a way that I think the university's student organization should be run.
Thank you, and over to Raphael.
I guess for specific things that WUSA has been able to achieve, one of the, I guess, the biggest things that I've really, been interested in is a few years ago, the creation of the, accessibility, or the Committee for Accessibility and, Disabilities. And I think that that's something that was absolutely necessary. There was an extreme lacking of accessibility representation, and there's quite literally right now not really any way to sort of gather a sort of understanding of how students with disabilities feel about accessibility on campus at such a large scale, besides like reports and surveys, and I think that, based on our success with developing that accessibility committee, I want to sort of, that's something that I'm inspired by, and I want to really go forward on that.
Thank you. That's your time. And lastly, over to Arya.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, listen, WUSA have had its fair successes throughout the years, but I'll be a little biased. I'm talking about what my people have achieved. So it comes from unlocking hundreds of thousands of dollars in new funding, actually, that this board managed to achieve. Actually, right? Things like getting roundtables up and running that this board managed to achieve. Things like meeting actually, credit to Rory, who was the current president, meeting with actually the president of the university on a much more regular basis compared to his predecessors, who some have had one meeting. So a lot of work is being done. A lot of work can continue to be done, but we do have a long process to go, and I admit that, and that's what our team is committed to, right? With a majority, we can pass bills, and we can actually pass policies, and create strategic plans on the operational side as well, by mandating operations to be able to actually get change done, right? It's time to be realistic, and it's time to push for a difference we can actually believe in.
So thank you to all our candidates. Now, before we end the evening, we're going to give each of our candidates an opportunity to give a closing statement for a minute each. In the statement, you have the opportunity to summarize your talking points and your campaign for the evening, as well as what separates you from your opponents. And we will start with candidate Rahman.
First and foremost, I guess what separates me, I mean, that's more to do with the fact that I guess I'm really willing to, I guess, hear all sides, all students, and push for the most push for a way for all voices to be heard. And I guess one of the things that I want to really emphasize is the fact that I really deeply value student interests, and I want that to be sort of the thing that I'm I guess most considerate of, pushing for accessibility, pushing for the protection of students' employment rights, pushing for housing and affordable housing advocacy for students, and also improving club autonomy, like student organization autonomy, everything like that. Sorry, it's my time.
Thank you. Let's move on to candidate Rasmuju.
Awesome. Look, the guys beside me, these are good guys who are very passionate about it, right? But when it comes down to this election, you got to ask yourself, who is capable of actually delivering, right? Our diversity and experience is matched by none, right? That's what our team brings to the table. Our team understands the system. Our team has students from across the faculties represented in them. I could have picked, a whole bunch of art students, but I found students from across this campus with a wide range of backgrounds and beliefs to bring in. What a good board reflects is one that is truly representative, and our experience and our diversity will continuously set us apart on that front. We have policies that are doable, that are going to resolve today's issues and not tomorrow's thoughts, and we are dedicated using a majority, because we can actually form a majority, both in the board and we have Senate candidates, to actually pass legislation that can make a difference.
Thank you. Candidate Feifel.
Yeah, thank you. I hope what I've been able to get across today is not only the experience of my team, but also myself, and a frustration that we're feeling from always trying to push for change from the outside for too long. It's been deeply frustrating to see common sense issues, consensus issues being ignored by an internal board because they're scared of students. Seeing things that have gone on for far too long. We have a campus that runs on steam. It's like the 1800s here. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And seeing board models that are fearful of that change, that are unwilling to press the university on issues when they do mistakes, when they act against the best interest of students, when they ignore their responsibilities to education. It's something that is deeply frustrating, it's deeply disrespectful, and more than that, it's not even an appropriate response on their behalf. We're working together here. We have a diversity of student opinions. We've all come together to best exemplify why students care, and yet we don't get that engagement. We don't see students leading by example, and we see all of our benefits being hidden by a board that is unwilling to resolve.
That's your time. Thank you. Thank you to all our candidates for this evening. Voting for WUSA elections will be open from 12th to 14th, and you will be able to rank your candidates at voter.wusa.ca. Best of luck to all our candidates for the remaining campaign, and thank you to everyone who came here. Have a good evening.